Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. I'm going to narrate a short story for you called Mystik Island. There once was this young girl. Her name is Melinda. She and her parents, she's the only child. They live in this beautiful cottage with her little cat. Her cat name is Chester. So she and her family, they live in this beautiful cottage home with a lot of woods in the backyard. She goes and ventures off into the woods to read her stories that her mom tells her, encourages her to read. She tells her she'll be very intelligent when she grows up if she reads. So she goes into the woods and she's reading her story by the lake. The lake is a beautiful scenery and it's given her much inspiration so that she can read. And then she reads this story called Mystik Island. So as she goes down one sunny day, down the lily path, she goes to the lake. And at the lake, she stands there and she feels something a little different this time. This time the wind isn't blowing, it's very serene, and it's very quiet. She could just hear the crickets and the water's not even moving. So she looks around and she wonders, what's going on today? It's very different outside. And all of a sudden, what shows up? What shows up? A big ship. This ship just comes out of nowhere on the lake. And the lake it's a small lake. It's also a private lake, so no one travels there. So she sees this humongous ship pulling up into the lake. And it shocks her, frightens her so bad that she all of a sudden she gets up and she runs away. So she runs back to the house and she burst into the door, and then her mother and her father, they're looking at her and they're shocked. They're saying, "Melinda, what are you doing? Why are you running in the house? You're not supposed to do that." And she says, there's a ship. There's a ship. And she couldn't talk. She couldn't even breathe. So her mother says, "Calm down, slow down, take a breather. What are you talking about?" And she says, I was down by the lake like I normally do." And her mother stops. "Wait, you're by the lake? What are you doing by the lake?" And then her father says, "The lake? Do you know you're not supposed to be there?" And then she stops and says, "Oh, well, I usually go there to read my stories, Mother. You always tell me to read my stories, and I feel like it's an inspiration to go down to the lake." And then her mother stops her and says, "Wait, Melinda, I told you not to go to that lake. It's dangerous. I don't want you to fall in. You can't even swim yet. So I don't want you to go there. What are you doing there? And you're by yourself." And she says, "Well, a very good explanation. I told you. I go there to read. But anyway, can I please tell you there's someone coming on our land?" And she says, "What are you talking about, Melinda?" So then Melinda stops her mother and tells her, "There is this big ship, and there were these two individuals on this ship." And she ran because she didn't know what was happening. And then her father looks at her mother and says, "What is Melinda talking about? There's no one that travels on the lake. The lake is a private lake. What does she mean?" So she says, "Come on, I have to show you guys." So they say, okay. They go out and they follow her through the woods, past the lily path, and they go to the lake. And all of a sudden, everything is back to normal. You hear the water running and the water moving. You feel the wind blowing. You feel the breeze, and the ship isn't there. So now her parents are looking at her and they're wondering, what is she talking about? Is she making up a story? But why would she if she ran to the house like that? So then her father says, "You know what, young lady? You're in trouble and you're going to be on punishment. Let's go back to the house. You weren't supposed to be at this lake anyway." So they go back to the house. And now Melinda's in her room. And she's reading her story. And she can't stop to think about that ship. So she's very distracted. Her thoughts are all over the place. So now it's nighttime. It's after 8. They had dinner. And her parents off to bed. And she was already tucked in and supposed to be sleeping, but she couldn't sleep. So now she goes out to the window. She looks out at the stars. And she's wondering about this ship. It bothers her so much so that she's also planning to take a trip down to the lake at night after she's in trouble and not supposed to be there. So now Melinda decides to sneak out the house. She creeps down the stairs very quietly. And then her cat, Chester, he shocks her. She says, oh, Chester, what are you doing? And she says, oh, you shocked me. And then she says, you want to go to an adventure in the woods? And she says, okay, come on, let's go. She grabs Chester and she goes out of the little cat trap door at the bottom of the door, at the back door. So now she comes out the back door through the trap door that the cat goes in and out of so that she wouldn't make any noise and wake up her parents. And then she goes down the lily path. It's very dark out there. And as she's walking down the lily path, she's looking around. She hears an owl. She hears these creepy noises. She hears animals. And she's getting scared. So now she goes down to the lake. And as she gets to the lake, she stands there because she's stopped by the fact that the noise that she heard coming down, it's not there anymore. It's quiet again. It's that same quiet feeling she had earlier. So now that it's quiet and she stands there and looks out into the lake, there comes this big, huge ship. At first, the ship doesn't appear to be big though. So that same ship, it's very small, like little mini small. Like it's so far away that the lake is big like an ocean. That's what it appears to be. So now she looks out and she sees it. The ship all of a sudden turns from this little small thing to this humongous big ship with a white flag on it. And it pops up out of nowhere. And then she's looking and she's scared. She's getting ready to run again. But she can't because now the ship is getting closer and closer, quicker and quicker. And all of a sudden it's right in front of her. So now she stops. She looks. She sees two kids there. One with blue hair and one with white hair. And they had these little pointy ears. And she's like, what kind of individuals are these? They look different. They're not like us. What's going on? So then they jump off the ship and they say, look at her. Hello, Melinda. That's what the one with the white hair says. Her name is Kathy. So now Kathy says hello. And then Melinda looks at her like, who are you? And then the blue hair person jumps off the ship and jumps his feet and plants his feet onto land. And then he says to her too, hello, Melinda. And she says, how do you guys know my name? Who are you? What are you doing here? And they look at her and they say, Melinda, I can't believe you don't recognize us. And she says, recognize you? I've never seen you. And they said, well, of course. And then that's when Kathy responds to her and says, you know, I'm starting to wonder if you paid attention at all. And she says, paid attention? And then Melinda is like, what do you mean? And then Carl, the blue-haired one, he says, well, Melinda, you know what we look like. You see us on this ship, and now we're here, and you don't know who we are. And she says, no, I'm lost. I don't know what's going on. I don't even know how you got here. How did you get that ship onto this lake? It's private. And by the way, it looks like an ocean now. What's going on? So now her cat, Chester, jumps out of her arms and walks over to the woods. He's getting a little scared, so he stands by the bushes and the trees. And she says, Chester, come back. And then Carl and Kathy look at her and say, Melinda, that's no wonder. You don't pay attention. You're not even focused. You just got distracted. And she says, well, I'm just making sure my cat doesn't run away. But I want to know what's going on here. I don't even know what to make of this. And how would I even know you guys? And that's when Kathy goes to say, well, we're from Mystik Island. And she's like, Mystik Island? That's the book I read. That's not real. What do you mean? So then they said to her, listen, we need you to remember who we are because there's a problem here. The problem is you read the story. We were on the island, and next thing you know, we're here. And then that's when Carl looks at her and says, Melinda, don't you remember? And she's like, remember what? And he says to her, the story that you wrote. She said, I didn't write a story. And then Kathy laughs and says, no, silly, not story, her summary. And then she says, summary? And then Carl says, yes, come on, Melinda, pay attention, the summary. You read the story and you only read chapter 1. However, you wrote a summary that your mother asked you to write because she wanted to make sure you was reading the book and paying attention. And now you wrote the summary, but the summary is not explaining the rest of the chapter. We need you to fix it. And then Kathy says, yes, that's why we're here. So then Melinda's still looking, turns around, look to see if her cat's there, and he's there, and he's startled, and he's standing by the bushes. Now her cat is a beautiful black cat, beautiful green eyes, pearling out into the night, glowing. So when she sees his eyes and his little body there, she turns back around and looks at Kathy and Carl and says, what are you saying? You're saying that I wrote this story or my summary and it brought you here. And then Kathy looks at her and says, Melinda, you made up the ending and the ending brought us here. And we need you to go and fix it back. And she stops and she thinks and says, oh my gosh, I did. And I shouldn't have done that. I'm so sorry. I only did that because my mother was forcing me to read. And I couldn't focus that day because I was feeding the fish in the lake that we are right here at now. And I was worried I was going to get in trouble for being at the lake. So I had to write something so that my mother wouldn't say I wasn't reading the book and then find out I was at this lake. And my lies are getting me in so much trouble. I'm even on punishment right now for being at the lake, seeing you guys and telling my parents and them finding out. Well, this has been a lesson all in one day. And they said to her, well, the next lesson is we need you to fix the story. So now Melinda, she runs and grabs a cat. She runs down the lily path and she goes back into the house. She creeps up the stairs, grabs a pencil and paper. And then she goes back down the stairs. And as she goes back down the stairs, she's looking to make sure her parents didn't wake up and hear the noise. She goes back out, grabs the cat through the door, and then down that lily path. And then she starts to read the ending of chapter 1. And she goes back and writes her summary. And she writes down what the chapter says. It talks about Kathy and Carl on Mystik Island. It's a beautiful island far, far away. It has gems and pearls on the ground. It's so beautiful when you go there and you're in the boat on this big, beautiful blue ocean. Such a beautiful, bright ocean. And as you get there, you see the pearls and gems light up on the ground. And there's a bunch of fairy-like people on that island. There's gnomes and fairies. And they're all magical and mystical. And that's why it's called Mystik Island. And a lot of them are there to help heal and save children. And their jobs are very important. So now, Carl and Kathy were set off on an adventure in the story. And their adventure was to go to this place. It's an orphanage. And they were to go to help the children gain their imagination back because they lost their hope, they lost their motivation, and they most importantly lost their imagination. And without their imagination, these gnomes and fairies would not exist. So they were off to set into this journey, which was so important. And they weren't to end up where they were now, which was at Melinda's backyard in that lake, because she made up a lake instead of the ocean, and the lake she made up was the lake she was at. So now, instead of cooperating the story that she made up, she had to go back and fix it. And as she's writing down the important part of the ending of chapter 1, she looks up and Kathy and Carl are gone. Just like that. Disappear. She looks around, it's dark. She feels the breeze coming back. The wind is blowing. She hears the crickets, the sound of the owls howling in the night. And then she has her cat next to her. And she's back, looking around at this place. And the two characters, the two individuals, Kathy and Carl, are back to their island, and Mystik Island, and set off to their important journey. And they're no longer in Melinda's backyard. So now Melinda, she realized that the moral of that story was you cannot make up a story to your parents or tell a lie and misuse information or tell the wrong story. She realized she had to tell things the right way. She had to tell the truth because the story is what got her in trouble. And it almost stopped those children in the orphanage from getting their imaginations back and fulfilling hope if it wasn't for Kathy and Carl setting out to that important adventure. So now she took everything for what it was and she began reading stories again. And she took those stories in and felt like they were the most important things to her. And when it was time to write her summary, she made sure that she reaccounted the situations and things that took place so that her stories could help to live on within itself. The end.